I think it's fair to say LG shot for the moon with its modular G5 from earlier this year, and it didn't quite make it. That's what makes the new LG V20 so much more interesting. After all, this is the company's second chance at crafting a flagship phone for 2016, and they've done a pretty good job of it. Right off the bat, it's not going to win any style points. I find the V20's look to be pretty boring, but it is at least well built. It's made out of a special aluminum alloy that's both lightweight and really resistant to drops, and it's capped off on the top and bottom by polycarbonate to give it an extra bit of drop protection. At the risk of sounding a little repetitive, the V20 is not modular, but you can at least pop off its metal backplate and swap out the 3200 mAh battery, which is probably for the best since it only lasted about 12 hours on a single charge. Now that's not bad, but definitely not as good as what we've seen from some of the V20's competitors. That said, the time you do get to spend with the V20 should be pretty fun. It has a beautiful 5.7-inch Quad HD Quantum display, which works really well in broad daylight. The big draw, however, is the tiny display that sits above it, which gives you quick access to apps, shortcuts, music controls, favorite contacts, and a signature, which, for the record, you can fill up with emoji. It's sad to say, aside from the music controls that you can use while the main screen is off, the second screen does still feel really gimmicky. There isn't a whole lot of use for it, and frankly, I just stopped using it after about a week. LG did do a great job with audio though. When you plug in a pair of headphones into the V20, the Hi-Fi Quad DAC fires up, and that gives all of your music a dose of liveliness and warmth that just wasn't there before. Now this happens across the board. I can't imagine why anyone wouldn't want to use this. So yeah, there's an emphasis on media consumption on the V20, and it's a very good device for that job. What's more interesting is how LG has tried to turn this into a device that's great at creating media as well. For example, you can use a trio of onboard microphones to record really high quality audio, and I've been really surprised at how good these recordings sound. It's so good, in fact, that while LG would probably prefer it if I use it to record me playing guitar really badly, I've been using the V20 as a work aid to record interviews. This emphasis on creation extends to the cameras too, although I do just wish they were a little bit better. But let's back up for a second first. Most of the time you'll be using the main 16 megapixel camera with an f1.8 aperture and optical image stabilization. Now, that sounds great, and it can be very good. My issue is really just one of consistency. I could pick up a Galaxy S7 or one of the Google Pixels and get good-looking photos just about every time, but the same can't be said of the V20. When you shoot in auto mode, it does have a tendency to expose things a little bit incorrectly or lose a bit of detail. Those same issues apply to the smaller 8 megapixel wide-angle camera, but you also have to deal with lens distortion, a bit of a fisheye effect when you're shooting pulled back all the way. Switching between the two cameras can be a little bit tricky too, if only because it's just not very seamless. You can tap a button to switch between the two cameras on the fly, but if you're using the zoom slider or pinching to zoom, you'll notice a bit of a delay as the phone switches from one camera to the next, and that delay can make all the difference between getting the shot you wanted and not. It should be easier to get good-looking photos out of the V20, but it is made up for by the fact that its manual mode is the best that I've used on any smartphone camera to date. It's really intelligently laid out, the results look fantastic. I can't stress this enough. If you're the kind of person who enjoys shooting with really fine-grained controls, you're going to find a lot to like here. Those manual controls also come in handy when you're shooting video with the V20. Footage is generally bright and above average in quality. I just wish the image stabilization that LG and Qualcomm talked up at the V20 launch event worked a little bit better. Now, beyond all of these power user features is a device that's ultimately very familiar. It does have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 chipset inside with 4GB of RAM and an Adreno 530 GPU. That should sound familiar to just about anyone who's looked at a flagship Android phone this year, and the V20 does run Android 7.0 Nougat with LG's custom interface just slathered all over it. If nothing else, the LG V20 does give you the flagship level of performance you would expect in 2016, but really, that's table stakes at this point. At the end of the day, the LG V20 is undeniably a good phone. It's just a phone that really isn't meant for everybody. I say that a lot, but I really mean it this time. Its focus on content creation and media consumption is great for some people, as is the ability to swap out batteries, but there are just better all-around packages out there if these aren't things you worry about on a daily basis.